We find that religious people really don't differ from the general population. Of course, they are a large part of the general population, so that's slightly tautologous, but you can see there's not a very significant difference. The majority of religious people, like the majority of non-religious people, are in favour of retaining the current 24-week limit on legal abortion. So this is my hypothetical explanation. I think what's going on is that I think just talking pro-life, pro-choice is a bit mean-spirited and misrepresents the position. Really, we've got two sorts of pro-lifers. We've got pro-life people who are anti-abortion, and we've got pro-life people who are pro-abortion. But I think that means something different by life. Perhaps that's why. Perhaps that's why so many of us say life does begin at conception, but we're pro-abortion. The anti-abortion, now, is that people who think that it's the bare life, the mere fact of existence, at the beginning of life, the cluster of cells. When we come to euthanasia, maybe life in any condition. It's the bare life that matters. Whereas the majority of people in this country today think that what really matters is a fulfilled life. We all want a fulfilled life, and we worry about whether the mother will be fulfilled, whether the child, an unwanted child, whether other children in the family, and so on. So it's not, I mean, the figures show it's not actually an argument between religious and secular people. Perhaps it's between two competing understandings of life, is my halfpenny worth.
For most of us, I think most of us began when with a moment of fertilization, when sperm and egg come together. And one way to think about this is to ask, generally when we start counting, when do we start counting from? What's the most significant transition? There are lots of transitions. But for example, if we think 14 days is a significant period in law about the embryo, 14 days after what? What are we counting from? What is the general consensus of where you start counting? What's your ground zero? And I think very commonly we start counting at fertilization. And it's because before that you have two things, sperm, egg. After that you have one thing.
We gradually develop. And in so doing, we develop a nervous system. We develop eventually the power to have sensations, perhaps the power to think, the power to give lectures like this. And that's because the potential which was there from the beginning is there, and if it's not impeded for one reason or another, that's what it produces at the end of the day. We are put together in such a way that that's how we evolve over time since the moment of our conception. From the very beginning, therefore, it seems to me, we are potential human beings. Sorry, we are human beings and potentially human persons. We're human beings because our DNA is human. We are not human persons because I think a person is defined in terms of something that can perform the activities which are characteristic of a person rather than a tomato. I therefore think that we become persons gradually over time.
At 6 weeks, we have got so many things happening in embryology and formation, especially of the finalization of gender. This is all from Holy Scripture. And skin, muscle, bone, hearing, etc., etc. The soul is breathed in just after 42 days. They say 6-7 weeks. So for us, if there is very good indication, although not in Holy Scripture, to do any abortion, there is nothing. Time of Prophet at Islam, 23 years, there was no single case allowed. There is no line in Quran or anywhere say you can do abortion. So 6 weeks, a big landmark. So if there is a reason, as some mufti said, to save the life of the mother, etc., before 6 week pregnancy, you know, under 6 weeks. After 6 weeks, it's absolutely forbidden. It's a human, it's godly.
I think installment is an uninteresting and unuseful sort of concept. Then I think about embryo loss. I've talked to you about the abnormality rate of birth. We know that sexual reproduction is incredibly inefficient. It has between an 80% and a 60% failure rate. If it had been invented as a reproductive technology, it would never have been licensed. It's incredibly wasteful and destructive of embryos. If you value embryos, don't have unprotected intercourse. Because each of you sitting in this room is here over the dead bodies of between 3 and 5 of your siblings that were probably lost in the very first month of development by your mothers unnoticed. So if we want to have future generations, we have to embrace the concept of embryo loss. And the only thing a good Catholic could do is actually use a condom, because every other method of birth control leads to embryo loss. The contraceptive pill does, the rhythm method does, all of those lead to embryo loss. If you value embryos and don't think we should create them only for them to be destroyed, then the only thing you can do is not have children, and the way you should not have children is either to get sterilized or to use condoms.
I think in both with abortion and with stem cell research, we have far, far more permissive laws than most other countries. I think that we disregard embryonic life. We allow experimentation on embryos and the creation of embryos for experimentation in a way which most other countries, most civilized countries, do not do. And I think that we don't have to have the laws that we have, and I would like it if more people were as concerned as I am. I have no realistic expectation that that's imminent, but I think that our view on this matter, as on many matters, ought to be to think, what do we think matters ethically? What do we think? Where do we think justice lies? And then how do we try to persuade people to try to enact laws which support a more just system, which encourage people to do the right thing, and which discourage people from doing things that we think are harmful? Most people take the views of their kind of people. Most people accept from society the kind of views of society. I think religious education is one way in which we actually can plug into a larger world, a world which is actually historically shows different kind of cultures, and also is a way into, for a lot of people, a way into philosophy.
Let me ask Majid the same question. You disagree with the law we have in this country now?
Of course. I mean,
why is it so wrong? Why have we gone wrong?
The law,
What's the mistake?
24 week abortion.
And stem
you
cell.
See, I just explained briefly before, the embryo, the fetus are holy creation. They are highly respected. They should not be at all killing of any human being. Why we do it to this weak vulnerable? And they should have right like everybody else. I understand you got a problem, you got rising teenage pregnancy, etc. But 2/3, 600 a day killed every day. This is disgrace in a civilized society called here Britain. And 400 of 600 because of sex, outside, before marriage, etc. Bring your Christian value and chastity back to your society.
On the whole, I think the current laws are as sensible as you're going to get. And the reason why I can say that is because, unlike perhaps yourself, with all due respect, I don't honestly think that religion ought to have a separate voice in these issues. And the reason I think that is because I think if you're going to be intellectually honest, your religious beliefs have to interact with the best knowledge, the best secular knowledge that you can produce.
A reality.
Yeah. And so, for example, if the religious belief that Galileo challenged had to be abandoned, and quite rightly, because religion has to change as we understand our world better. I therefore don't think that we ought to have a separate voice, qua religious, me qua Catholic, which isn't available to anybody else.
There's no such thing as universal reasons that everybody accepts in advance. And I think that the notion that people should be ruled out from saying certain things, should be ruled out from saying, I don't think you should do this to this person because I think that Jesus said you should look after the Good Samaritan. And they want to say that in public.
Nothing should be accepted in advance. Things should only be accepted after you've heard the combination of evidence and argument that support them.
Well, but you said that you shouldn't have religious arguments, shouldn't be allowed.
The reason I was
that's what I'm objecting to.
I was the one who said that, and I said it for a very specific reason. An argument which is simply and solely religious has, as such, no particular standing. It may have very good standing if it illuminates for people dimensions that they might otherwise not have thought of. It seems to me that there are one or two instances in which it is quite obvious that a woman has an interest in what is happening, which are completely different from the interest that any man could have, and rape is an obvious example. Moreover, it seems to me that rape is a fairly easy example to sort out in the woman's favour, if only because she knows that she has been raped. The whole thing can happen very early, and I think the earlier these things happen, then the less fully developed that human being is, and I would think at that stage probably not yet a person if it exists at all. So I think there's a good case where a woman's interest in her future life and everything else is intimately connected, and she has a unique voice. But I think there are many other issues on, the rights of much older fetuses or things, where it's not obvious that the woman's own life is more important than that of the baby. It may be, but I don't think it's obvious. And the mere fact that I'm a woman doesn't actually say so one way rather than another.
It doesn't follow from the fact that someone is of a particular gender that they have a particular right either to speak or to have a particular conclusion. The argument about the legitimacy of abortion follows from either an argument about the relative moral status of the mother and the baby, or possibly from a self-defense type argument if the baby is threatening the life of the mother. It doesn't follow simply from the fact that the person making the decision is pregnant or is a woman. Although I would also agree with Gerard that that might give the woman a unique insight into the situation and might engage our compassion in all sorts of cases as well. So for me, women's rights are not a premise in a moral argument like everything else. For me, they are a conclusion of a moral argument, and you have to have that moral argument about the relative merits of permitting or not permitting abortion in this, or indeed in all cases.
Do you think that it would make a difference if you were making a decision that would contribute to the future suffering of a child, as opposed to just ending a pregnancy early?
Well, I had a great deal of sympathy with what he said, that there are certain handicaps with which a person can be born, which they would not, obviously they would prefer not to have been handicapped. But if you ask them, well, do you wish you'd never been born? Many of them might say, no, of course I don't wish that. So I don't think there's going to be one answer to that question. It would depend on the seriousness of the handicap, on whether, for example, that person is going to have any intellectual activity at all, in which case, they don't have a mind about whether they would like to have been born or not to have been born. And so I don't think there's a simple answer to that question.
The future is for adult stem cell. And you take in cell from your own body, the issue of rejection, etc., finish, is not there. So please take in consideration, I tend to believe lately there is a lot of cover-up about success in adult stem cell, and the people pushing all the time for embryonic stem cell. And I said before, if you got ethical mean to consider, but to kill the embryo?
Why would they? Why would they be pushing for that? Why would there be a conspiracy?
I don't understand. A lot of things pushed in our society. I don't understand it. From gay marriage to homosexuality to so many things. I said you have to be Christian back again. No, thing going very. And this militant, aggressive, secularism is taking over all our society.
I do tend to think that the people who are doing the adult stem cell research are really quite interested in the intellectual property end of it, and therefore aren't making it as public as they might until they've got it a bit more developed than they have.
There are various reasons why once you've started a project, you have personal and professional investment, and so that there's a reason why things continue, even after another option has become viable. So you would expect a kind of momentum, a research momentum to build up. I'd like to take the point about the law and the Bristol case. There's the case in Europe which said that essentially you can't patent products which have involved embryo destruction.
Oh, that's right.
Interestingly, that judgment appealed to the British law as well as to the German law. And they said that even though Britain and Germany have widely differing views about what you should do with embryos, they have actually quite similar views on what an embryo is and when it starts. And that's, I think, a way forward to try to distinguish some of the differences we have about value, and I think there are differences about value, from questions which we can have some agreement about the science and also about when life begins, I think. If by life we mean the life of a human being and not the life of a human person.
The question is how the idea of personhood surely is a philosophical one, which we're never going to be able to be in agreement on. But if it's going to be determined on what we do, then an awful lot of people who can't prove that, therefore, aren't safe.
Okay.
Really.
John, do you want to kick off on that?
Well, on that one, there is a big difference. There are many distinctions that we need to make. There is a difference between defending something and advocating it. There is a difference between defending it and saying that the arguments for or against it are inadequate. So on the question of infanticide or after-birth abortion, we currently in this country have a law which makes abortion legal right up to term, right up to birth, right up to the end of the third trimester for serious fetal handicap. Now, there is an inconsistency here which goes both ways. You have to ask what you think has happened. If that's right, that law's right, and it's on the statute we're going to actually support it for other reasons, you have to ask what has happened down in the passage down the birth canal such that the entity is unprotected at one end and protected at the other. You have to think that there's some change that has taken place in that very short geographical space, and depending on the speed of the delivery, temporal space as well, such that there is a moral difference, a difference in value at one end or the other. Now, I think that account is absent. I don't think anybody has given a satisfactory account of how that could be. Now, of course, that might mean that the protections that are available once the child is born follow it back up the birth canal in utero and maybe even further back. All I'm pointing out there is an inconsistency. What I'm interested in is the question of whether or not our account of what it is that makes lives morally important, valuable, worth saving, wrong to take, and so on, where that starts to apply to the emerging human individual. Now, I don't think that there is a clear answer to that question, but and I don't think that there is a difference between abortion and infanticide. And I don't think in certain circumstances infanticide is wrong, but in that, I don't think in certain circumstances that killing healthy adults is wrong either.
I don't for 1 minute want to deny, and I don't suppose anybody would want to deny, that, say, a living sperm cell or a living ovum is a living human thing. It's obviously human, it doesn't belong to any other species. Similarly, a fertilized ovum, an embryo, is obviously a living human thing, and in this case, unlike them separately, is potentially a human person. When it becomes a human person is not a clear thing. So I don't really want to be rushed into saying that because something is a human living thing, it's thereby a person. I just don't think it is. It's potentially a person. And if it aborts spontaneously and everything else, that potential is never realized. And indeed, in Aquinas, I think, said he didn't think it had a guardian angel or had original sin until it was a good deal later than that. So I think we have to distinguish between human being and human person.
I just think we should be very, very, very suspicious of the idea that there's a distinction between persons and human beings, such as you can have human non-persons. I think that the notion of non-persons is a kind of like non-words, is a way of, it's actually, it seems to be about status, it's about trying to get, I think, eradicate a certain kind of status.
But potential persons rather than non-persons?
But I still think that
experts.
I think that if we talk about human beings, we know what we're talking about. If we talk about persons, then we're talking about a movable feast.
There is basic human nature, basic human feeling in every one of us, and it's put in our heart and soul by God Almighty. To justify baby nearly to be born disabled, kill him, kill her, and now we're moving after is born. You celebrate. John said you can kill this child. We're going, I think, too far. Please avoid a lot of philosophy.
You and me, I've got lots of problems, health and other sort. I don't think they diminish the value of my life one jot, nor do I think my life's value is diminished by the fact that I am a lot older than you and therefore have less unelapsed time left to me. I think you and I should be valued equally. I hope you agree.